Okay, you're live.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. Of course, the first item is approval of the agenda and order of business. I wanted to add one thing, and that's a letter to the province concerning non-resident property tax. So right after our public input, I thought we'd add that there.
Please, as council, could we also add a short item, just a cell phone coverage, cell service coverage again?
Again, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's it for me. Is somebody prepared to move? We approve the agenda as amended? So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Okay, public input, and I understand we have a couple of letters to be read, and we also have one member of the public who wishes to speak, so I thought we'd let you go first.
Great, shall I take the hot seat?
Yeah, you take the hot seat, yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for listening to me this morning. I have
It's Paris Baker, but
It is.
in case anybody doesn't know.
it's a prepared statement that I've made, and it's essentially on behalf of a lot of people who have contacted me. So I'm a realtor and I work with John Duckworth, and so we have a lot of clients who are quite upset right now. So what I'll do is I'll read this, and if you have any questions, then afterwards, then let me know. So I've titled it "Non-Resident Tax Imposed by the Provincial Government is Un-Canadian and Unwelcoming to Foreigners." So as I said, I have a stack of letters in my hands from folks who are totally beside themselves with this new sudden tax measure.
I could interrupt you, but people in PI aren't foreigners, are they?
No, but un-Canadian
But yeah,
because it's
Applies to them too.
applies to them too.
Yeah.
People from PEI. Was that a joke?
He's just making a point that even if you're a Canadian and you were born here.
The point is that
Yeah.
it's not only foreign people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it is un-Canadian and unwelcoming to foreigners. So those are the two
I'm welcome
groups.
to Canadians as well. I would
Yes.
suggest that anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
I won't interrupt you again, Paris.
Okay, thanks, Derek. That did very well pointed out. So I'll re-edit this and come back next week and sure.
No, we're with you.
So I've never encountered anything this severe in my time here. It is, in my opinion, it is totally backwards economics. I even find it embarrassing to be a Nova Scotian right now. In this very fragile world, where we need to come together and help each other, Tim Houston is telling fellow Canadians and international residents to get out. In Chester, these folks are the economic generator for so many businesses, and it will inevitably cripple our village. The really embarrassing part of this tax equation is how to communicate this new reality with our seasonal folks from away. They fund our charities like the Chester Playhouse, our health center, the Arts Center, pay for landscaping services from Ocean View and All Outdoors, fill restaurants like the Kiwi, Forecastle, and the Rope Loft, and invest in new construction and repairs to their homes. They don't use our education or healthcare. A vast majority have links with family, and many are returning to where they were born. They make our rural areas richer culturally and more diverse. So if you want to get through this, we need to stand up to Tim Houston and make ourselves heard. What is Daniel Barkhouse doing? We need action immediately to stop this un-Canadian and totally unfair tax. Speaking on the housing crisis with rising rents, owners of summer cottages in rural Nova Scotia are not the answer for a cash grab. This issue is resulting from a few entrepreneurs who are taking advantage of development incentives and low-cost housing in the city. 1/5 of all Halifax properties are owned by a small number of very wealthy entrepreneurs. If you want to tax the folks who created this mess, double the tax for secondary income homes purchased by Nova Scotians. That's how they do it in New Brunswick. That would certainly be fairer. Also, we should be putting higher tax on multiplexes and use the tax to build affordable housing. New governments in this province make their major economic mistakes as soon as they get into power. The NDP canceled the Yarmouth Ferry, the Liberals devastated the film industry, and now the Conservatives are killing the goose that has been laying golden eggs in rural Nova Scotia for years, i.e. non-resident investment. Subsequent governments have tried to get the ferry and the film industry back again. Let this government not introduce this tax, only to rescind it after realizing the damage it has done to the rural economy and reputation of this province. In closing, let me ask this: what would residents of Nova Scotia do if they woke up one morning to learn that their property taxes had tripled?
Shoot me when I went to the grocery store.
That's it. So I have all the letters here and a copy of my speech, and I'd love to be able to give this to you
Yes.
so that you can forward this on to our provincial government, because I think it's crucial that we attack this and stop it from happening.
No, we appreciate that, and we'd like to have it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
No,
Concerns? All good?
Not from us.
Yeah, I knew you would, Darren.
No, I appreciate your presentation, and you probably know that we are in the process of sending a letter to the Premier as well.
Yeah.
I have totally read the second draft yet, but that's what we're discussing next. Have you had an opportunity to speak to the Premier directly? I know you're connected.
I sent him an email as soon as I heard this may be happening. And that was maybe 2 months ago, and I did not hear back. Which is funny because I know Tim.
I know you do. What I'm saying.
I was in the Conservative, I was, the head of the Nova Scotia South Shore St. Margaret's Association.
Conservative Association.
Yes,
I don't know if you want.
And
to
I
go on the
and I
record, but
still-
I want people to understand that you're not coming from a political perspective.
No.
You're in fact, a card-carrying conservative.
That's
fair
right.
to say, or were.
that's right.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it's happened. And the reason I joined the Conservatives was because of the Nova Scotia Film Tax Credit
I knew that.
cut. So the fact that this has happened bewilders me.
You think, because you know Mr. Houston, that there's any chance he could change his mind?
I don't know. I haven't had communications with him, but I would love to.
I mean, part of the value of the film industry to Chester is that when those people come here and do the filming,
Yeah.
that they see what a beautiful community it is, and they'll buy houses,
Oh.
invest in her community. That's-
Absolutely, fill up the
that's part of it.
restaurants. I mean, all you have to do is talk to Linda over at the Kiwi.
Yeah.
And you can see the curve of,
When we're here.
including COVID,
Yeah.
all these bumps in the road.
Yeah.
And she will, tell you what certain policy has done in a positive or a negative way.
Yeah.
And this is gonna be one of those big road bumps. And Dean Leland is, starting with Whitegate now, and he's just out of COVID. And now another one is hitting. Now, I don't know how severe I'm looking at this as overall
Yeah.
with the province. I think it is just sending such an awful message. I have friends in Toronto who've contacted Rex Murphy. There are people down in Florida who've talked to DeSantos, who's thinking about, taxing snowbirds. Like, this will have a ripple effect and in a very negative way. So.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
No, it's not good for Chester.
No, it's not. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer, the first letter or whatever.
We received 3. The first one is from Mike Morris. He writes, I am very concerned about the new non-resident property tax policy, which is about to be implemented by the province of Nova Scotia. I believe that this tax will have negative consequences for the community of Chester, which is now our home. I expect that council has already identified the many ways that this policy may hurt the municipality and the community of Chester, so I won't reiterate all of those concerns. I am a lifelong resident of Nova Scotia. I have owned seasonal summer property in Chester Basin since 2007, and I am the third generation of the Morris family to own that property. In 2019, we moved from Bedford to live in Chester Basin full-time. I am also concerned with the impact of the policy on the hope that my daughters will become the fourth generation owner of our property. They grew up spending summers and many winter weekends in the area. As they left home to complete their education and begin careers in Ottawa, they both said to me, "Dad, we don't much care about Bedford, but Chester is very important to us." That is part of the reason that we sold our home in Bedford in order to settle full-time here. I expect they will inherit the property when the time comes, but an exorbitant annual tax bill may push the idea beyond their financial reach. I'm sure there are many friends and neighbors in Chester and around Nova Scotia who would share this concern. I am including a copy of the letter I sent to several provincial politicians earlier this week. My key point is that the policy to address housing availability and prices in Nova Scotia does not need to impact seasonal home ownership. I hope that you share my concerns and that you will take some action to help us all to fix this problem for us all. Mike. We have
Thank
another.
you. Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
Our second was received by Phil Moncton, a seasonal resident of Chester. I am Canadian. Recently, the Nova Scotia government introduced a non-resident property tax, which will effectively triple the property tax for any non-resident who owns a property in Nova Scotia. Over the 7 decades that I've been on this planet, I have visited every province in Canada and lived in several of them. As a youngster, I lived in Nova Scotia for 6 years, and I consider myself a blue noser as much as anything. Moving freely between provinces and feeling at home no matter where I went has always been part of my Canadian upbringing. Now I am being treated like a foreign property speculator by this proposed tax bill. We have been fortunate enough to have owned a cottage in Nova Scotia for over 20 years. During that time, we have received guests from around the world, and we have treated them to the beauty and hospitality of Nova Scotia. I have loved their visits to Nova Scotia and can't wait to return. All have loved their visits to Nova Scotia and can't wait to return. I wish that I could say the same. During those 20 years, we have supported local businesses, contractors, restaurants, marinas. We have also made donations to local sport and art groups. We are part of the community. Please review and change this tax. It is un-Canadian. It will do nothing to cure the housing crisis in Nova Scotia. It will only serve to sour other Canadians on Nova Scotia and ultimately negatively impact the tax base. He added later, "So that you are aware, we purchased the old Burwell home at 7 Frida's Point Extension 10 years ago. It is a classic Chester cottage and is likely 100 years old. It is not insulated and thus only a seasonal cottage. As a result, it cannot be rented for 12 months of the year. But we love the place and we are trying to maintain the original look and feel of the place. We have invested in the foundation to try and keep it from sliding down the hill into the ocean. We are also having the windows restored, maintaining the original glass and frames. For all this work, we have been hiring local trades. We would much rather pay them for this work than just hand over an extra $30,000 in taxes to the province. We love Chester and feel that we are a part of the community. Unfortunately, this tax will alienate the summer residents of Chester and ultimately destroy the lovely social fabric of the community. Whatever you can do to dissuade the Premier and the government to cancel this tax will be appreciated. If we are forced to sell the property, a very possible outcome, the only potential buyers would be those from Nova Scotia who are looking for a summer residence. Supply will outstrip demand, and we will likely have to sell below our purchase price and below the assessed value, thus reducing the tax revenue for the municipality. If a buyer is found, it will not be one who is concerned about affordable housing. The tax will have solved none of the issues it is intending to address. In fact, it will likely erode Nova Scotia's tax base. Thank you for your consideration, Phil. And we received one final from Bill Morris. I am Bill Morris. My family's roots in Cape Breton and the Annapolis Valley go back generations. My primary residence is in Toronto, and I have a summer residence at 142 Half Moon Cove Road. Nova Scotia just introduced a 2% annual property tax surcharge. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume the municipality will see none of this revenue. I am hoping that the municipality will engage to get this stopped or reduced to the level of the only other provinces that do this, PEI and BC at 0.5%. What I am asking for is your leadership to quantify and communicate the potential negative impact. Specifically, I propose 3 things. Number 1, ask Tourism Nova Scotia to help. Given that we are essentially guaranteed annual tourists who spend on much more than hotels, rental cars, and restaurants. We spend on charities, construction, maintenance, gardening, property taxes, and when we consume healthcare, the bills are paid by other provinces. Number 2, survey local businesses and charities to educate them on this and ask what the impact could be. Number 3, share that you are doing this with other municipalities in the province. Time is against us since this was sprung on us without warning. Thank you, Bill Morris.
Thank you all for letters. Okay, so we have a letter prepared to send to the province on this issue, so perhaps we can review that now.
Mr. Warden, perhaps you should also, I think all of us have received individual letters that haven't been tabled.
That's correct.
And I think just not 3 people that have written. I've received numerous
I have
other letters.
also.
And they haven't asked me to present them to council. I can see if they would like that. But besides the phone calls and
Maybe we can.
I'll forward our
Or
letters
we
to-
can put them on the record.
Yeah, so I've got some as well. I know what I said, yeah. Yeah, so we can include those and copy them to the premier as well. So Dan, do you want to review the letter? Well, most of us, I think y'all got it last night.
I didn't see it last night.
If you'd like me to read it, or
I
you
think
just like.
why don't you read it out?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's addressed to the Premier and would be copied to the Minister of Finance, Minister of Municipal Affairs, our MLA, the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, the Association of Municipal Administrators, and I think all municipal councils in the province. Perhaps you may wish to add Tourism Nova Scotia. Mr. Morris suggested that might not be a bad idea. So it indicates that the council has discussed the proposed non-resident provincial property tax and the proposed non-resident provincial deed transfer tax as announced as part of the 22-23 budget. Council understands that the initiative's stated intent is to make housing more attainable and available. However, no information and data has been made publicly available that clearly defines the problem and demonstrates how the initiative will solve it. Implementation of the initiative should wait until robust information sharing and engagement with municipalities, industry, and the community occurs. There are many reasons why council opposes the initiative. The annual $2 per $100 rate is exorbitant. The municipality has over 1,200 property tax accounts where tax bills are mailed out of the province. The assessed value of the properties matched to these accounts could result in an increase up to $5 million in property tax in our municipalities, by far the single largest property tax increase ever levied for our communities. 2, the province is encroaching into municipal tax base with this form of direct provincial property taxation. Property tax room will be lost to municipalities that are already rely heavily on property tax and do not have authority to level income or other progressive taxes. 3, the initiative is intended to address housing supply. If the initiative is intended to address housing supply, then any funding raised should be directed to the creation of housing supply and should remain in the municipality where it's collected to be invested in projects that will see an increase in attainable and affordable housing. 4, the council does not anticipate that the properties impacted in our municipality are aligned with the stated attainable housing goals. In other words, most properties sold as a result of the new $2 tax are not likely to be properties relevant to the stated goal. 5, seasonal property ownership by non-residents has been a long-standing activity in our communities, including generational ownership of property. These community members contribute to social, recreational, cultural, and other activity, which creates significant positive economic impacts in our municipality and throughout rural Nova Scotia. Many of these community members contribute their time and money to community organizations and facilities. Council is particularly concerned that this does not be considered and may be lost. Council is also concerned that new construction activity being planned by non-residents will be canceled. The council does not support the goal of increasing the amount, does support the goal of increasing the amount of attainable housing in our municipality and the province. Your government's increased focus on this core function is positive. Council is taking its own steps to support this goal in areas that are core to our responsibilities. We intend to invest more in core infrastructure that supports new and expanded residential development. We recently doubled the budget for a progressive low-income property tax exemption program for homeowners. We will look at land use bylaws and explore permitting initiatives such as backyard and in-law suites. And I think actually we may even have some provision for that outside of the village area. We would identify that to an enhanced regulatory framework to manage, dampen the rapid growth of the sharing economy, Airbnb in our region, is also being explored. Council has also approved $100,000 in funding to a nonprofit affordable housing initiative in New Ross and has agreed to waive development fees for this proposed project. Finally, Council is supportive of solutions that solve problems. However, the current proposal has too many unanswered questions and will likely create negative consequences disproportionate to the positive. Yours truly, and then would be signed by the board. So that's the proposed draft.
That's our first kick at the can anyway.
I'm sure Pam is gonna correct the third line down. You said 2, so you need to add it to the,
Okay,
that's all, it's minor, but,
right, thank you.
and you did say on
I'll need
third,
permission from council to let you speak. Does anybody have a
I
problem?
just want to know if I get a copy when it's done.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, it's public. It'll be public.
It'll be on my Facebook page. So.
Okay.
So does anybody have any issues with us sending that letter off?
Great job, Dave. Very well done.
I think it was an excellent letter. It's got 2 comments if I'm right. Yeah. In the first paragraph, it's the implementation of the initiative should wait. Almost indicating that
it's okay.
if that was okay. Somehow we gotta, I think, yeah, tighten that.
Initiative should be canceled.
And canceled unless you can prove that it makes some damn sense.
Or doesn't, we can't.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there would be line at the very end. Like asking them to consider these issues and. I don't know,
Before
just-
implementation.
If there's, like it ends abruptly.
Okay. Yeah,
Closing
closing sentence, yeah.
sentence, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
So I think-
the guts of the letter, I think, faces, and we've discussed this before, and it covers. And I think Pierre's raised some very interesting issues too. I mean, we don't mind stealing your ideas as well as others, because some of the letters I got was very well reasoned. And I think it has to be, you just can't be angry.
Yeah.
We have to be rational and reasonable, which he hasn't been. So other than that, I think it's great.
Okay, so we'll send that off unless somebody says, no.
One thing I wanted to say is that it's good that we're sending this to the Premier and, but I feel like we should be sending separate correspondence also to our MLA. I feel like our MLA has been strangely silent on this issue publicly, and I feel like she's our representative, and we should direct correspondence to her, ask for her to advocate on our behalf.
Yes, and come speak to council.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
You want that motion? Or do you need a motion?
I don't think it's just a direction to staff to write a letter directly to our MLA as well. Okay? Okay, that's what we'll do. Okay. So we don't have any public presentations beyond that. Nope.
Thanks for coming in, Pierce.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Any errors or omissions? Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. No public input or presentations. 7.1 correspondence, Town of Mahone Bay regarding regional housing strategy.
Okay. So what I know that was part, there was some discussion at the mayors and wardens
Oh, yes.
meeting about regional housing strategy, and Mahone, the town of Mahone Bay was advocating for the development of a regional housing strategy. So what was discussed at the mayors and wardens meeting that at this time, the province, I don't think has yet awarded the housing needs assessment, the provincial housing needs assessment. We understand that that provincial housing needs assessment will include research in every municipality in the province. Municipalities are specifically identified in one of the deliverables. So we talked about sharing between the municipalities of Lunenburg County, the initiatives that we're undertaking. And then I think essentially to wait for the outcome of the housing needs assessment to determine if it would be appropriate to have just continue with our initiatives or to have a regional housing strategy. So that would be underway. I think our planning group would like to be part of that, part of the team that shares that information. Don't know if we wanted me to talk about maybe the short-term rental regulation. That was also, that's tied into the housing initiative. So Garth Chester kind of agreed to kind of lead a discussion related to short-term rental regulation. So Garth did a presentation on kind of background and history of the rental regulation, short-term rental regulation that currently exists in the province, and some power and authorities that municipalities have to our land use bylaw. So the plan is to, I think, develop terms of reference for, I guess, to develop options alternatives for the 5 municipalities in Lunenburg County to consider for enhanced regulation and potentially taxation of short-term rentals.
It's moving forward. It just all takes time.
So I have a question. Then, in terms of the first item that you brought to our attention around the correspondence, related to the correspondence that Mayor Vinnie sent to us. So specifically in his second to last paragraph, of course, building on the province-led needs assessment, and you had mentioned that I believe the province is yet to award that for the housing needs assessment. So where are we with all that? Did you mention that? I missed it, or?
Did so that certainly looked at the RFP, know that they've issued it.
They've issued it.
They're ready to award, I think. They just
Okay.
haven't formally awarded.
Okay, issues, but yeah, haven't awarded it, okay. That's one question I have, and so that's to them, that's their timeline, not ours, okay, I get that. Was there some discussion, in, the group of Lunenburg County 5 municipal units, recognizing that we have historically worked with Lunenburg Queens when it comes to Social Housing Action Coalition, the needs assessment that we now have on our shelves, which was Lunenburg Queens.
Yeah.
And so on and so on. So I'm just wondering what that discussion was like at the grouping of 5 municipal units.
We didn't discuss working in cooperation with Queens at the meeting, but now that you mention it, it may be something that we should consider.
Well, yeah, I'm not suggesting one way or the other, but I think, I do think it should be on the table because it's, I mean, to me, it's only being fair and nice, I guess. And I would think that the municipal units that are representative to SHAC would appreciate that as well. So,
Didn't come up, but now that you mentioned it, makes some
you.
sense. We should at least have that discussion.
Do we need a motion basically responding to this, that our council supports moving forward with this? or-
I think that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that.
that would be
If everyone's agreeable to the approach.
So what they're asking for is if we would endorse the development of a Lunenburg County housing strategy.
And we would, subject to seeing all this.
Yeah, I think
information.
that it's premature to create or to suggest creation of such a thing. But we'd be no better than the province.
Yeah.
Just starting initiatives without the data.
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's something that would interest me, but you know, I think that I think philosophically, it makes sense that it's a regional issue and we should deal with it regionally. I'd like to see the data.
Yeah.
Once
Well,
we
I
get-
think that's the intent is when the data comes, do we want to try to work together? I mean,
I mean, we can communicate back to them that that is our overall philosophy, that we see this as a regional problem.
yeah,
Well, I just know on the SHAC committee, we formed a subcommittee of just elected officials, representatives, and we spoke about this actually when the needs assessment, before we move forward with that, to wait for the needs for the province.
see what they
Yes.
identify and then
Yeah.
see what the best approach regionally would be.
So just to pick up on that if I can, so you spoke about a needs assessment, housing needs assessment at SHAC. And before moving forward, waiting for the provincial one. So if it's being discussed at SHAC, am I missing something? If it's being
Well,
discussed at SHAC,
this is just a new group that we formed on our own
Of Lunenburg Queens.
of Lunenburg, of everybody that's, yes, Lunenburg, Queens,
Yeah.
everybody who's an elected official, town of Mahone Bay.
And I'm
Yeah.
thinking that's great.
Yeah.
But then there's that discussion of Lunenburg Queens elected officials, and then there's the mayors and wardens of Lunenburg County.
Yeah.
That are discussing it as Lunenburg County, so I'm just not getting it.
But I think the main point is that, I mean, we've decided to wait for the province
This is
to,
what we've done.
yeah, so, yeah.
No, I think it's great that everybody wants to do this. I
Yeah.
really great, but we could end up with,
We don't want to overlap.
No.
We
No,
understand.
absolutely, yeah.
thank you for.
I
that
agree,
update.
yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
So we'll just indicate that we're in favor of moving forward once
Regional.
of a regional approach, yeah. Because for us, it could be bylaw changes, a variety of things that need to be done. Which Shaq can't do for us. Okay. Andre, cell phone coverage.
Now, this is an issue I've brought to council many times and had great support here. I think everybody's experienced the same problem.
Absolutely.
A complete degradation of our mobile phone coverage in our area, specifically all along the South Shore, actually. You know, it's not uncommon if you're trying to use your cell phone to communicate with somebody to have calls drop several times in every conversation, and broken communication. It's atrocious. Complete blackouts where there used to be coverage. I want on the record, the service is garbage. It's garbage. And I think we need to write the province again and the providers and ask, because last time we communicated with them, they responded that they were going to upgrade, they were in the process of upgrading some towers because they realized that they were underserving the area and that those upgrades were to be completed in October. I've seen no improvement. I don't know what the experience of other councillors are.
It's terrible.
But they're great at platitudes. I love to tell the truth. of what's going on. I mean, they always give you this, careful on camera. I'm not used to that yet, George. But I mean, you see the letters we get, right? And that, they're garbage as well. So I mean, can we find someone who will actually tell us the truth, what's going on, if they're gonna fix it, or this is what we have to live with going forward.
And the issue is it's more than a convenience item. I mean, there's the economic reality that in this modern age, we rely on mobile devices as part of our core business, but also all of our emergency services rely on them as well. So it's now become a safety issue. As our emergency services, we have people that could be operating on the 103 and there are literally places there that are completely black. Places where we had service before. And so like I see it as a safety issue and an economic issue.
So who are we gonna correspond with? Who are we gonna get to come in and speak to us about that? Jonathan's not here, is he?
Yeah, it's not cell, it's that he's broadband anyways, this is cell coverage. So we wrote to both Eastlink and Bell. I believe we heard back from Bell. They did say that they were in the process of installing some new towers. So we've even asked questions about those towers and haven't heard back yet because generally speaking, there's an approval process and we would be part of that approval process. So asked for information on that, haven't heard back. I know that it's been mentioned at the REMO discussions from an emergency standpoint. So we have not written to the province, so we could write to the province, but I think it's probably a federal issue as well. So we can write to, I think it's the industry, I can't remember the name of it, but we can look up, yeah, it's a division of, yeah. So CRTC, we could write to the province, but probably a letter to NSFM would hurt as well.
So perhaps you could draft a letter for
I
us to
can
those
draft
parties.
something.
Yeah, I wonder why the problem, like, because I know over my way, like you say, it was always great, and then it's degraded over, and I guess it's because it's more usage, maybe. I no idea.
Probably is, yeah.
I can't explain it. All I know is in the time of bag phones, we have better service than we have now.
Well, I agree, because I used to have one of those, and certainly on Highway 14, it's really
Doesn't
bad.
work very well.
It doesn't work well at all.
You can't even talk to somebody at the bank in Chester.
Really?
Yeah.
Downtown Chester is terrible.
Is that right?
I use it in my office.
Isn't there a tower by the fire hall?
Yeah.
Explain.
I don't know. I don't know. Well, we'll have a letter drafted that we'll bring back to council.
When I want to use it in my office, I should be very accurate. I can't use it in my office. If I go up to the sidewalk
You can.
outside my building, I can sometimes get.
You know, that's crazy.
Well, I have the same problem. They see me pacing around, they think I'm a crazy person. Well.
Well, why?
You- that's-
Did you say?
Okay,
that?
so that's what we'll do.
On the record.
Okay, budget. I think that's where we are anyway. That is where we are.
And you got a new pair of shoes on there?
Oh, that's something a minister does. I'm not elected.
Oh,
Alan needs a new pair of shoes.
No, you're getting a hat.
Yeah.
War time.
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully this goes well.
I agree.
Yeah, well, we talked about it quite a few times, and I mean, I've read it from one page to the end, whatever. We'll see.
So yeah, this is the first chance to go through the full budget presentation for the 22-23 fiscal year, both operating and capital, as well as reserves. So we'll go through here, starting with a few pages of highlights to summarize, the big changes, the things that are worth noting specifically at a high level. Then we'll get into the departmental presentations where the other department heads will join in to give a bit of information around what's going on in their departments and the budgetary impacts of that. Then we'll have some discussion on strategic priorities, the various initiatives that tie into the 5 overriding strategic priorities that have been set by council. And then some capital budget slides, debt servicing projections for the next 5 years, similar for reserves, so current year expectations, balances, transfers, additions, as well as 5-year summary. And then we'll talk about rate setting, everybody's favorite activity.
I already read that, it's good.
Yeah, okay. Well, in that case, I can just.
Rate setting.
Yeah, right, I suppose you can't move that. And then there's one page for a parking lot for some items that are perhaps worthy of discussion, but not specifically included in the budget as of yet. And then on to motions and next steps. So without further ado, let's get into the highlights. So we'll start with revenue. Property tax revenue is estimated to be up fairly significantly, $1.1 million higher than previous year. This is due to the increases in assessed values across every category of properties across the municipality. Total residential property assessment is up 9.3% this year. That, for reference, across the province, it's up 10.8%. So we're not even above average. It's kind of within range. The average property is up 7.9%, and eligible properties are capped at 5.4% increase. The cap is set by the province every year using the CPI figure year-over-year number for, I believe it's October. 5.4% is the highest that cap increase has been since they started using CPI. However, for reference, like the last 4 years of cap increases have averaged only 1.3% per year. So the average assessed residential property is assessed at $178,786 for 2022. For reference, that same average assessed value for residential properties was $165,621 last year. So taking those two average values, the increase in the average tax bill this year is $93. It would be $63 for those capped properties. Taking that same average property of $178,786, if it was capped, if it was somebody who's been within the cap for the last 4 years before this, they would have seen increases of $3, $12, $33, and $10 over each of those last 4 years. So it's been relatively low for the recent history, and then this year is quite high as compared to that.
Can I ask questions as we go along here?
Sure you can.
The tax bill increase on average is $93. Is that what it would be if we had these new numbers?
Yeah, so using those average assessed values presented in the line above that, applying the residential tax rate of 70.5 cents, that would represent an increase of $93.
So it would be that. Okay. That's confused me, so it is $93.
And that's, of course, we haven't even had the discussion yet about keeping the tax rate the same or not. As far as I can recollect, we haven't had that.
Yeah, sorry, would be, it's probably more accurate.
Yeah.
Assuming residential rate stays the same as it was,
Yeah.
using those two assessed values as the average from last year, the average from this year, it would be 93. But the 5.4% would only be $63, right?
So I understand. I was just, it is confused.
Yeah, no, you're correct. Commercial assessments in total are up 4.9%. And resource assessments, I need to make a correction. That says 5.1. The actual number there for total resource assessments is 6%. With the average resource property having increased the property bill would increase by 3.5%. That 5.1 is actually the number that represents the wind farm developers tax. Again, all of these would be assuming rates remain consistent, just based on assessment value changes.
So resource assessments is up 6.0.
That would be the total value of all resource properties in the municipality.
Yeah, thank you.
The transfer tax is being budgeted at $1.79 million for this year. That's up almost $420,000 from last year. Last year's budget, not actual. The actual was significantly higher than that. And as we discussed a few weeks ago, 50% of that is budgeted as an allocation to the Infrastructure Development Fund that is being set up.
I mean, it remains to be seen, but that might be a bit high if this new,
Traditionally, we've been low, but yeah, who knows what this new
if this new
provincial
thing.
policy is going to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
they
it
have
remains to be
impact.
seen what the impact of the transfer tax will be. It is a tough one to predict year over year. Historically, it does trend upwards, but that doesn't mean it declines every year. Historically, we've used the practice of using the trailing 3-year average of actual due transfer tax in order to set a budget.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, that has been lower than actual, and I don't have the economic background or input to tell you what it will be this year until we get through it.
It's our best guess. Yeah,
It was last year.
that we put 100%. Yeah, last year.
Yeah, the year that just ended.
Yeah, just
a week ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Landfill fee revenue is down about 130,000 from last year's budget. That is primarily due to a reduced volume being accepted from controllable sources due to capacity constraints to just until we're sure that we get the space in the landfill to accept higher volumes, and that could change over the year. If we have a new cell built and ready to go by end of the year, we could increase those volumes again to bring that revenue back up. Gas tax, the budget is down about $600,000. That is primarily because last year it was doubled temporarily, so to remove that doubling brings it back down to what it had historically been annually.
So there's no indication they're gonna double it again, right?
I have not heard anything. I don't know if anybody around the table's heard information. I haven't, but
Budget comes out today.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if they double it, we'll change it.
Yeah.
yeah, and that really doesn't have a net effect on our operating budget because we receive it as revenue and then we move it over to a reserve to be used as, through the process that we would normally spend.
Yeah, because you can't spend it for every case.
And another, it's a smaller dollar figure, but I figured I should probably let you know that the private roads admin fee revenue is down by about $5,000 from last year. That is because we have cut the admin fee from 10% to 5%. And you will see a revised bylaw coming to you in the near future to put that into the bylaw. Total expenditures budget is $29,269,176. That would represent a 3.5% increase from the 21-22 budgeted expenditure. The bigger components that go into that would be the salary, wage, and benefit category. Is $5.37 million, which is up about 627 from prior year. And that is made up of a number of pieces, previously approved changes to the organization structure. So new or recategorized positions that have already been discussed and approved makes up 434,000 of that. The cost of living adjustment, which was approved on March 31st, makes up 195,000 of that. And then just standard movement, people progressing through their defined ranges, offset by people leaving and being rehired at different levels. That kind of summarizes to about 106,860. Something new this year in the budget that we've applied is the idea of a vacancy allowance. So the budget generally includes an estimate of 100% filled positions at all times. Here's the budget that we would need if all of our approved positions were filled at all times. That doesn't tend to be a realistic expectation. There is always turnover. And there is never exact coverage. The day somebody leaves, we hire somebody the next day. That's just not reality. We especially saw the impact of that in the 21-22 fiscal year, where as of the Q3 projection, we were looking at about a 5.5% reduction on the salary wage budget, just due to those gaps in filling positions. For further reference, in the year before that, it was 1.4%. So we're using a 2% allowance for that this year. It is represented as a negative expense. It's not allocated across all, like not every program has that 2% in it. There's just a lump included in what is called the contingency program, which we'll get to a little further later, to offset the organizational wide expectation of a little bit of capacity in that budget to be a little bit closer to expectations.
On the revenue side, we should have had a revenue stream for penalties for those who leave.
What, sorry, I forgot to send out those bills. How much are we charging people for quitting?
I like that. That's interesting. I never thought of that.
You can do an RFD on that. That's some distant.
Some of the other expense items that have gone up this year that are sort of out of our control would be the non-discretionary expenditures, such as the transfer to the RCMP. We're budgeting just over 2.2 million for that this year. That's up 219,000 from prior year.
Not a thing you can do, but
And insurance premiums have been going up across the board. I can say that this is not unique to us or any particular insurance area. It's just the entire industry has been seeing significant increases year over year lately. So we're seeing about an 18.1%
that's
increase.
a significant increase.
It
Now, I mean,
certainly
I know
is.
there's
Yeah.
nothing to do either.
I mean, if it got to be the point where it was, great, we could reassess our risk profile on things. However, I think we've done a pretty good job of that for now. So I don't see an incentive to do that, but if council felt different, we'd be happy to hear their input on that. School board contributions go up along with uniform assessment values. Now, that's only about 2% this year because the uniform assessment is
Based on previous.
a 1 year delay from, so we will likely see a
Next year
bigger
it'll go
increase in
through the
that
roof.
contribution next year, yeah. And the South Shore Regional Libraries contribution is up 26% on the year. We were informed of that over a year ago that would be coming. So that's not a huge surprise. Other significant changes on the expenditure side is we're not budgeting anything for sustained operations this year. Last year, we had budgeted just over $1 million, 1.02. To account for the cost of them diverting a significant portion of the waste from our landfill that they have not yet been up and running. And this year we are not budgeting for that line item. So that's a reduction in expense of just over $1 million in the landfill. And along with the deed transfer tax discussion, there is an increased expense reflecting transfers to reserve to go with that development fund creation and the transfer of that 50% of the deed transfer tax. The next slide is just a summary of the grants that have been included in this year's budget.
Can I ask one question about the RCMP to sort of backtrack? But oftentimes we pay for an allotment of a number of officers. I think that's how it works.
Yeah,
It's certain number.
forget the
I
exact.
think it's 8.
8. And but routinely, those positions are vacant. Yet we still pay.
Yeah.
How exactly is the contract structured with the RCMP?
So it's not our contract, it's a provincial
Provincial,
contract. So the province contracts with the RCMP and we participate in that, and it's a district policing model. So we pay for a number of officers on the ground, the equivalent of their salary. So we're not actually employing them, or so we pay the equivalent of a number of officers, but then there's other costs that are included in the district model that are also built into our cost. So there's like the commanders and all of like in the command structure of the RCMP, they are also including, and then the province contributes a portion of the RCMP costs.
And also emergency response teams and all of that.
Yeah, I understand all that. I think that when we're trying to figure out what service level we need, we sort of determine it by sort of like
Officers. on the ground.
officers. But then we don't get that
Not
because
officers.
I think historically, we look at it, almost never do we actually get the number of officers we paid for, yet we pay. And I'm a simple person maybe, but I know if I were hiring 4 painters to come paint my house and only 3 came, I don't think I'd want to pay for 4.
Unless you have a contract price.
Yeah, well, I'm just really not sure how exactly that contract is written. And I'd love to look at that someday because I just find it to be very baffling and hard to explain to the public why it is that we pay so much for so few.
Well, the contracts with the province, not with us and whatever, right?
Some municipal units have been examining their policing, looking at alternate I don't think we're in a position to do that, but it's something that maybe should be on the table at some point.
I would agree. I don't think it's for this year, but I would like very much for us to someday, in the somewhat near future, have a look at that, because it's something we sort of, it's not really, well, I guess we don't determine it to be broken. So we're not looking to fix it, but it's certainly, I think that if you actually do look at it, it's pretty, financially, it's pretty inefficient.
It would be a UNSM thing, would it not? Discuss, if we were going to have a discussion on it, is that ever on the UNSM agenda?
Well, every municipal unit does it differently. Well, I shouldn't say everyone. A lot of them use RCMP, but some of them have their own force. Do they still pay for RCMP service in that case?
I think there's a couple of different models. So the towns will have usually their own force. And then there's two contract types with the province. One is I think it's a community policing model, which is what we're under. And then there's a municipal model. So they direct, the municipalities can go direct, I believe, to the RCMP. So I think HRM would be an example of that, where they have their own force, but then they also, in the rural areas, use RCMP, and I think they participate in a direct contract.
But I think
there.
the
So
whole
there's
way-
different models. We could probably get a presentation from somebody from Department of Justice that explains how that.
Yep.
Yeah, because I don't
How
really
that works.
fully understand it either. I just know that we have to pay, we have to have families and what else, and whatever. Yes, Tina.
Oh, sorry, yeah. No, I've not heard anybody in terms of, Andre had mentioned that it's difficult to explain sometimes or answer the questions. I have not heard nothing but positive reports in terms of the coverage with RCMP, in terms of the people that I at least have conversations with around the holistic approach around, it's not just those 6 or 8
Oh, no, you
that
have
we're paying for.
access to everything.
It's that emergency response, it's traffic control, it's drug enforcement. It's the RCMP search and rescue dogs, if you will, that come out of New Minas. Other areas, other jurisdictions, not even just Lunenburg County. So I would be, sitting with a dunce cap on, I guess, if I didn't say that, yes, we should explore some other models, but I have heard nothing but good things around the makeup of the numbers of RCMP officers in terms of coverage and protection when we need it, And that's what's important to me. When we need it, where they're coming from.
Doesn't matter. They come from anywhere. But
Exactly.
I don't think it would hurt for us to have somebody come in and tell us how this all works.
Yeah, not about exploring another model at this point, sure, we would do that on our own, but I think we understand.
Just understand.
I guess that's where I'm coming from.
We,
I think I like analogies, obviously. So if I were getting my lawn mowed and I like the quality of the lawn, I have no problem with that. But if I find out that I'm paying 5 times more to have my lawn mowed than
Your neighbor.
my neighbor, then I'd be like, lawn doesn't look so good anymore.
Well, we'll get somebody to come in.
I was just gonna add that if you didn't catch it in the media, Cumberland
Right.
County has signaled that they're gonna do a policing study.
Yeah.
that's what I was referring to.
Pardon me?
That's what I was.
Oh,
referring
okay, yeah, so when their report or review becomes public, it's likely something that we could share with you to see if there's any lessons learned or opportunities for us.
So they're RCMP now, I would think, in Cumberland County.
That's my understanding, yeah.
And I think it's, I'm not happy with the coverage, but I think it, the job requires us to look at these things, and I think we should.
Absolutely.
We'll have somebody come in.
Just so everyone knows, we sit on police
Yes.
advisory. They're normally got full staff from what the reports we get on the quarterly report.
The last little while.
Pretty well staffed. And we do get a lot of coverage from other areas if needed, and we also share our police officers if needed somewhere else. And there are other services come in that we pay nothing for. So, from what I've heard from,
Well, it's all part of it.
it's all part of the big picture and from what I've seen, and I don't think we've questioned it before, I think we get pretty good coverage. And I think maybe if someone would like to come maybe to one of those meetings. and sit-
Yes. Yeah.
Or the police advisory
Yeah.
meeting, just to sit and come and maybe ask some questions, I think if we welcome quite a.
Yeah.
I'm just glad they weren't around when I was on the way to this meeting this morning.
Well,
Oh.
there's good and bad and all of them.
No, it's just we do have to meet.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so one of the other larger items in the expenditure budget would be the grants that are provided to various organizations around the community. So on page 5, we have a summary of the various grants that are included in this year's expenditure budget, including the ongoing budgeted grants of 113,190, council grants 25,000, tourism for 8,000, the 7 $10,000 district grants, recreation grant 20,000, youth sponsorship at 4,000, leadership 4,000. Economic development sponsorship 6,000, and then the various grants out of the wind energy reserve for $439,000. And
Quite a bit.
so the next section is where we're going to start to get into where my colleagues are going to jump in to help out a bit. So first up, we have Tara with her deputy CAO department summary.
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually, first thing I'm gonna do is say it's not the deputy CAO department, it's the corporate and strategic management department, so we should have caught that, right? But that's okay. I won't go through this first slide, that's just an overview of everything. We have more detailed for each program area. So the first program area is the council. So in the council budget, council works to make decision on the best level of service required to meet the needs of residents living and businesses living in the municipality and businesses conducting operations in the municipality.
Now we know what our job is.
Yep, that's, so in this budget, some of the changes that you will see, or that some of the operating highlights that you see in there, the salary and wages have been increased to reflect the CPI increase. You'll see that there's an increase in the major capital grants. So we've increased that budget by $239,000. Those are things you've already approved or discussed already for the major capital. And then we've also removed $60,000 from this budget. That was for the COVID emergency grants that we have in there. So that's what you see reflected in that part of the budget.
That's why we have flexibility in the budget. You never know.
All right. I'm going to move on to the CAO program area. So this is the really the corporate and strategic management and CAO portions of the budget. So in this budget area, you will see what we've done this year is we've moved the occupational health and safety program, which is usually in your public health and housing budget. We've moved that over into this budget. So you'll see some increases there because the salary for that 70% position is coming over into this budget. So it's a savings from the one program area into this program area. That's why you see some increases there. And then you also see in this budget that the accessibility coordinator, last year it was in this budget, but it was in a different line item. This year we've moved that to salary and budget. But it's still a shared expense that we're doing. So that's what you see in the revenues there, are some of those revenues for that position. And then we've also increased the advertising and public engagement budget a little bit, just to reflect some of the increased engagement we've been doing. And then we also know that we'll be doing some engagement with boundary review as well. That'll be built into that budget. The next program area is the contingency. So this is the area where you will see that 2% vacancy factor in there. So you see a negative expense of $109,000. That's the 2% vacancy that we were discussing earlier that Tim mentioned. And then there's, we generally keep $50,000 in there for contingency for other program areas, staffing positions if we get, if we need it. So that's what's in there for that. The next program area, we talked a little bit about it, police and corrections. So our costs are going up by 11.04% this year. That is for the new contract for RCMP. The piece that you don't see in here that is an unknown right now and still in discussions is that when the new contract with the RCMP or for the RCMP was approved by the federal government. There was also a back pay piece of it, a retroactive pay piece of it. We don't know what those costs are, or whether they're gonna be passed on to us. That's still an unknown yet, so there's nothing in the budget there for that, if that happened to be passed on to us.
And it will,
We're still waiting for
Well,
word from
maybe.
justice on what that means. Yeah,
Again, that's where the flexibility becomes more.
yeah. So you already know what those costs are entailed, the increases that you're seeing there.
Just as a comment, I was happy to see as part of the narrative, and maybe it was there before, years before, but around the narrative, when we make reference to the senior safety coordinator program. I think that's important, just again, as part of that narrative. I'm not sure if this whole document might be online. I don't know at some point or not, but I mean, I just think it's great to remind people that's still part of that senior safety piece,
Yeah.
policing and what we do. So, yeah. Thank you.
The Remo budget, you'll see a slight increase this year. Couple of things that are in there. Remo has added some honorariums. So as a region, all of the units have an honorarium. The assistant emergency coordinators are now doing a rotating call basis. So last year, it was approved by the Remo Advisory Committee and the councils that we would add $2,500 in there per AEC for an honorarium to account for that on-call hours. They're doing weekend rotating on call. So I think they do one in 5 or something like that is what they do for on call. And so you'll see it twice in there, but we also have offsetting revenue because we have 2 AECs because we provide the service to Mahone Bay, but you'll see the offsetting revenue there as well
They pay back.
for that, yeah. And then you also will see that the $10,000 for the water program that we normally do, that's been removed for this year, and that's because we know that we're shifting the focus to discussions on a community well program. So those are the major highlights in that portion of the budget. Fire protection. So fire protection continues to be handled through our 7 fire departments. We are anticipating that within the next month or two, you will see some recommendations coming forward. You'll see the final report from the consultant. It is
long overdue.
it is long overdue. It's been discussed by the subcommittee of the steering committee. We're going to take that report back to the steering committee this month, by the end of this month, hopefully, not hopefully. We are taking it back by the end of this month to the steering committee. We're just in the process of getting some new members on that steering committee because we've had some people leave the committee. And so as soon as that committee is back up and running, that report will go to them. It has the consultant's final recommendations. The steering committee has gone through those recommendations and made their own set of recommendations that will come to council. So we'll take those, the steering committee's recommendations, the consultant's recommendations back to the subcommittee's recommendations, back to the bigger steering committee.
That, right.
Once they endorse those, it will all come to council. And then our program and what we put in the budget and what we do will be based on the recommendations and our path forward from there. Yeah.
But it may be helpful to put something in a contract. Certainly when we hire consultants, we expect a timely response. And it may be something that is in the RFP to address that.
Yeah, and those were in there. Those are standard clauses we would do. There was a few extenuating
Yeah,
circumstances.
we
that
asked him for different
caused
stuff
this
and back and
delay.
forth, and I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't all.
Just take
there.
a
it wasn't
It
all.
wasn't all
really
there,
did.
yeah.
It did, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's,
Sorry,
we're working
Andre.
with 7 departments.
Just wanted to ask, I can't remember what created the additional cost last year. I don't remember. That jumped it up $100,000. I don't remember what that was.
I'd have to go back and look at.
I'm
what
wondering
that
if it
was.
was the new workers' compensation was
That might have been
probably,
Oh, yes, we provide workers' compensation at the fire stores.
Okay.
so that the provincial, there's more, I guess, terms covered.
Yeah.
And for all volunteer firefighters, and you may recently have seen the province announced additional, I think cancers would be covered under workers' compensation for firefighters, and the province will cover it for a number of years. Thereafter, it will become a financial responsibility of municipalities. I think it was around 2025 or so, but we could dig into that.
We can dig into
that number, but I think that was one of the significant cost drivers was the workers' comp coverage. Yeah, we never used to do. Okay.
Okay. So community health and housing, the decreases that you'll see in this one are, as I mentioned, we pulled out the occupational health and safety and made this the program area focus on the public housing and health house. So the money that goes to the housing authority is primarily what you're seeing in this budget. We took out the OH&S stuff because that's really not community health and housing. That's an internal program. So that's the main change there. And then economic development. I think Erin is in the call with us. She's at home today. But this year, the team will be leading discussions on the growth strategy and the development of an arts, culture, and recreation strategy. So those are the major changes that you see in this budget. Erin, did you want to?
Anything? I didn't see her.
She's here.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so those would be the two big additions that came in that weren't originally in the budget. So the growth strategy around the Exit 6 area, which we're planning an initial staff workshop in the coming weeks for that. And then the arts and culture recreation strategy, which I think for that one will follow our business retention and expansion program. We're going to put some specific questions in the BREE program around like for the arts and culture sector to kind of feed into that. Yeah, so those were the major changes to the economic development budget.
Yes. Thank you.
And then Eco Park, Erin, did you want to take this one as well?
Sure. On the Kaiser Meadow Industrial Park, we're going to continue working on the site certification under the Atlantic Site Certification Program. If anyone is following that program, they have been releasing new sites. So it will be exciting to get our park on there when the time comes. Right now, we're in the middle of our phase 2 environmental site assessment. They did finish their sampling, so they would have received those results from the lab yesterday, and we should be getting a report in the next couple of weeks. From there, we will come back to council with a revised concept plan, scope of work, which we had originally in there, the $100,000, but it will be less than that with the revised scope, and then move forward from that point. We didn't want to do the concept plan before getting the results of the phase 2, so we're trying to do this in a logical step.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, and then the last one is the school board mandatory contributions. The increases here are related to the increases in uniform assessment.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that's how they arrived. I didn't know personally
Yeah,
how
they
we
based on
arrived
the
at
assessed value of our
our
property. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
good.
why we pay
Yeah.
a lot. Anyway, nothing
And
you can do about it.
Yeah, our contribution would be a lot, yeah.
Nothing you can do. It is what it is. Okay, departmental operating summary.
So I think we'll do similar to initial slides, just a summary of all the program areas. So I think we'll just roll right into first one, animal control. So we're in year 2 of a 5-year contract for animal control service. And so no changes anticipated for this year, just with basically what we're operating through the contract. And that's no real changes expected on that front. Next is bylaw. So if you recall last year, we hired a new bylaw enforcement officer for that 21 hours a week, and so we'll be continuing that service. That seems to be, that level seems to be adequate for monitoring and maintaining the level of service we have and responding to the bylaw complaints that we have. And so we plan to continue with that for the upcoming year. And of course, that will also work with the Igorson and Site Lake Committee and any of those issues that come up with. The committee is very well aware of all those situations that come up that we deal with through bylaw. So yes, no real significant changes in the bylaw front. We can just jump in if anybody has any questions.
You'll know what we do. Yeah.
On the building inspection side, of course, last year we had one of our building officials leave, and we had a period where we were under a little bit of stress, but we were able to, of course, continue to have our full-time building official as well as our part-time building official for on average a couple of days a week. And so that has worked out very well, and we plan to continue with that into the upcoming year. And so again, not a lot of changes related to our building inspection. We anticipate this upcoming year that we will have continue to see a high demand on our building officials, and so it will be really important to continue to have that part-time building official to assist. And of course, within our shared services model, we do have the opportunity to use the services of our neighboring municipal unit if required. And the only other item that I'll point out in here is with the shared services discussion that there's a little bit of decrease in cost related to that as we move through that initial phase one. That's some of the initial costs related to software. So our suite, Laserfiche, all that work, preliminary work has been done for one-time costs. So those costs are now complete as we kind of move into the next phase of that shared services discussion.
I'll just share my experience at my own company that we had a hard time finding engineers to fill roles, and we advertised a lot to try to find experienced people. In the end, they weren't able to be found, and so we've kind of almost a few years ago we shifted focus and we just started training. Basically, when you came to our company, you went into engineer school and you got trained to become like a proper consulting engineer. We have a number of young talented engineers that are now coming up through the roster of becoming good professional engineers that have the background, because they couldn't be found. We had to make them.
Well,
And I feel like, you know, I don't see reflected in this budget any cost for training new people, and I feel like we should have some budget here so that we can, if something happens to Brent, that we don't have to solely rely on our joint services model. And instead, we're creating some capacity. I feel like we should have budget item here to build our own building officials. Yes, of course, we can't guarantee they're going to stay when they're done, nor can my company guarantee that the engineers I train will stay. But you hope that you have an environment that they're going to enjoy. You try to find good local people that have a background like that. You know, a connection to this community, and you invest in them, and then maybe they'll invest in you. I would suggest that we have some budget there for training building officials.
What's the process for that? Because I know that you got to go through Nova Scotia building.
There's definitely a process for certification for building officials. And so to Andre's point, that the challenge is if we were to lose a building official just to advertise to replace, it is extremely challenging.
I'm more interested in if we were to budget something to train somebody who's not here already or who is here or whatever. Can we just do that? Like, will they just accept somebody into the training program, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we can do that. And so whether it's so ideally, it's nice to have people when you're training that they have some experience in the trade with carpentry, building homes, but not necessary. There, you know, anybody can step in and start the training right from scratch, no matter what their background is. So there is an opportunity to do that. So in this case, if we were to bring somebody on to train them, currently we don't have a position right now that we could train somebody. We don't have anybody that has expressed interest in becoming a building official for us. So the step would be to have a new position that we would we'd have to put some thought into what that position would look like and what work they could do while they were working through their certification process.
I just
So
feel like
there is a-
we're weak there, we're soft there.
Oh, everybody, yeah, that's
And-
like, it's one of the harder ones to fill.
You know, maybe it's gonna cost us something to invest and harden up that position, but I feel like it's incumbent on us, so, you know, Brent, who is an excellent building official and, you know, a local and a long history in this community, you know, he could get sick and then we'd do without. And I think that, I'd be in favor of putting some money aside to find a person, even if that person becomes redundant for some period of time. Because we know even if Brent doesn't get sick, you know, he's only had probably
Yeah,
5 years.
I don't have
left.
any objection to the training part, it's just I don't want to hire a brand new employee for,
What we hired someone or if we wanted to go down that road for a part-time or not a part-time, but someone with carpenter's experience to work in a municipality that maybe could lead training to the building inspector, that at least we'd have a job and certainly as a part-time carpenter, I'm quite confident. And everyday role.
Yeah, so there would be an opportunity, you know, conversations with our construction operations department, whether there's an opportunity
yeah,
to
is
hire
there
somebody
somebody
that,
there who would like to take advantage of it, we'll pay.
right, somebody
Yeah.
that has skills similar to, if you look at, you know, Gippy or one of the other staff that would have that type of skills that you could, if they were interested in that training element, there would be an opportunity.
What would,
to look at
what
that.
would we need to budget to do that?
So it would be a staff position, so I would anticipate, just off the cuff, I would anticipate probably in the,
80 to 90, roughly.
pardon?
80 to 90.
Well, I was gonna say 70 to 80, so yeah.
Oh,
somewhere.
that's $100 a person, right?
Yeah.
That's,
that-
it
that's right.
would be a position for sure.
But you know, this, you know, in Alberta, for many years, you've heard of people that go out there and they basically get trained on the job. This is not new. This shortage of labor that they experienced in Alberta 15 years ago is here now.
It's the first time hearing the laundry suggestion, and I think it's a great suggestion. I think we need to do it. When I look at our total budget, I think $89,000, you know, it's nothing really. It's a good investment.
So,
Just like to have a little more.
I'd like to see staff come back with a report of, you know, we can take advantage of this person. We're not just, you know, paying
Yeah.
$80,000.
Just for them to take courses.
And I think we can do that.
Yeah, but they're gonna have to work here sometime and take courses when they're available, like, what's that all
Oh,
mean?
yes.
Like, I don't.
It's an apprenticeship program, basically. what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I don't mind that, because I know how hard it is to find buildings.
Yeah, the other piece to that would be, of course, our discussions in shared services and just what, you know, what the implications are on that model and how this fits in with that and the training needs and the number of officials in the community and all of that. So. yes,
By the
it
time we
would
get to
help.
that point, we'll probably be halfway through the year.
Yeah.
So it'll be half of what you're asking.
so I just,
So if we threw $50,000 in here, we probably have enough to do it.
I want to say for the record, the staffing levels of other municipal units is not my concern. Our staffing is my concern.
Absolutely. So I would say if we were going to take that approach, and thinking even from that hiring perspective, that, you know, budgeting for a full year would be, you know, even attracting an individual for part-time versus a full-time for a year period.
I think we could
But we
probably
could,
take a
You-
look at
you
it, put
may
some
get-
money in
yeah.
contingency and come back to you next week before approval
Yeah,
of
we
what
could
that
do that.
is looking like.
I think we need to see the details.
Yes, yeah.
we would need to put
We-
together
we would
a
need-
program, and I think Chad immediately identified Manny's group as a potential opportunity, because I think there is significant advantages to have a carpenter or electrician or a plumber and who has spent some time in the field, so that when they're doing, I think that assists with customer service.
Yeah.
Because they've had experience on job sites.
Yeah.
And I think probably maybe instead of just the book training as an inspector, so I think we could put together some ideas of what that might look like.
Then
And
we could put some money in.
earmark some money in contingency.
That work?
Yeah, I'd be pleased to see that. I just think we should be thinking ahead on this. budget.
Yeah. Oh, I know. If I can build inspector nearby.
I maybe I meant, but, so if we have, I'll just say Ben, okay, Ben's worker here. So he's in Public Works. So if this was presented to him in a way that, Ben, you're working at Public Works, how does this position interest you? He could still do his and then he would be an employee of the municipality, which he is now. And I'm just using Ben as an example, or Brandon, whoever. And then when these, because you know what it's like with these courses, they could take years.
Yeah.
And so maybe we could look within our own organization first.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think
All of those options. I guess
Yeah,
what we're
yeah,
looking for, what are the options?
What are the options? Yeah.
so. We have done some of that. We can do another check-in.
Yeah.
For sure, but we definitely would look, so because we're always, within our budgets, we have professional development for our staff, and and we're, I think, very supportive of, any of our staff further in their education, if that is an interest of them. So we absolutely, that would, I think, be part of our discussions.
Yeah, and if that creates
Yeah.
internal
a gap in our ability to do work, then we gotta fill that gap.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, so we need some options from. Yeah.
Some financial incentive to take the training, because it is extra work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once they complete it, then they get the next bump to take on the new role.
Yeah.
And it's important.
Okay.
to frame it like that, because that's important.
There we go.
Always is, right?
There's 7 grand.
Okay, on the fire inspection side of things, so again, we had a gap this past year, and we lost our fire inspector, and so we now have moved into transitioning our bylaw enforcement officer to provide additional hours for him, and he's just in the process of just completing his fire inspection training, and so he will be able to take on that role, and in the interim until his certification is complete. Again, we've been able to use that shared services arrangements to.
So we can do a bit of it, and they gotta approve it.
I get it, just step out for a second.
Okay. Once we get through one more piece, we'll have a little break.
Okay, I can. Hold on that long. I have some drugs to take.
So for planning and development, there's a couple of highlights in there. So just last week, we had discussed the challenges within development. And so we have included that additional development officer position within the budget. So we've made that addition. The village plan review continues, and right now we're in the middle of the work with the contract for the architectural study. And so that work is actually going to carry over from last fiscal into this fiscal. And so we've carried that consultant work forward. And that will be the most significant expenditure for the upcoming years as it relates to the village plan review. So that work will continue. And of course, that will come back to you. And actually sometime in the next few weeks, we'll have some information. There'll be some public engagement related to the architectural study. And so we'll have that information will make its way to council in the next couple of weeks. And the long anticipated uniform signage. So of course, we all know that we have approval from the province, so we have our signs in stock, and so we'll be looking to implement that.
We actually have
program
a permit to do it, or whatever.
We have everything is in place. The signs are ready to go up, and so we just actually have a staff meeting next week just to finalize the implementation of that and ready to deal with our local tourism businesses to get their names in the sign and get them in the ground. So unreal. 4 years.
They'll probably withdraw that now that now that we're taking that stance against the.
We're gonna put the signs up anyway. We'll put them up anyway. Moving on to recreation. So again, we've made some just minor adjustments to the budget based on how things have been going in terms of our programming to the public and implications of COVID and making adjustments as the budget as we go through. So we're anticipating for the upcoming year that we're able to get back to a little bit more of a normal in terms of events and higher attendance at programs and all of those kind of good things.
Summer staff next week.
Summer staff are going to be, they're all we're in the process of that hiring. So so looking forward to back to somewhat of a normal year in terms of programs and events. Our open space plan, of course, this past year we worked on our design work. And so we will be looking at our construction in the upcoming year. And we have some slides that will follow this. We'll get into a little bit more detail, both on open space and our other capital projects.
I just I thought I saw an article in the paper yesterday About the bridge? 2 bridges, was that?
That was not our bridge, that was our neighbors, so that was the 2 bridges on the
Ours
dime.
hasn't been approved yet.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our funding is
Okay.
is
Yeah.
still waiting.
Pending, okay.
And the other decision that council made not so long ago was just the review of the CAMS and CDS operations as a community school. And so we have that in the budget to continue with that. Part of our community school offering as well. So there's no further questions on those. Do have some capital budget slides to go
Yeah.
through.
I do, it's around the year, practice in library, and this is on the,
Oh, sorry, I did skip that one.
no.
No, it's a little further down.
Oh, it's further down. I'm
Do
doing
the
skip.
capital and then that'll come last.
So capital first, and you're gonna touch on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to take that little short break before we go here, do this? Or do you want to get
I
through?
don't want to
it?
jeopardize Bella's health.
No, that's okay.
You better
continue.
take-
Still have the forum.
I go by visitor park. Parking's on that area there. I thought.
Is that what you think of those?
Well, I thought they were quite well, but this is where I put my thumb when I drove by them. This is the signs behind the cars.
Yeah, I know, and then it's a pylons and temporary signs.
So it's more. But every car that I rolled out was off of the road.
Oh, yeah. The community would actually